Ew.
Alright, here we go. You can hear everything too on the stream, right?
Say that again?
You can hear the stream through here, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. There we go.
So are we, how many more members are we anticipating?
With this live stream, you mean between you and me?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just us. All these other guys are coming.
Oh, wow.
So we'll just talk.
Okay. And,
I mean, they can't join in. Let me see if they're coming.
alright. I really do enjoy that peaceful ambient music. The ambient. That's nice.
It took me a while to find it.
Oh no, it's nice. It's got the right reverb going on.
Yeah, it's not too overbearing.
Yeah.
I want to see if these guys are joining first before we start because I don't want them joining in as we're live.
Mid-discussion. Understandable.
Stop to ponder how the world has manifested into what it is now. Where did the likes of J.R. Tolkien and Rowling get their magical ideas and concepts, among many others? In this new series, we shall explore that topic, starting off with one of the oldest belief systems, one of the oldest mythos to have spawned on fantasy and wonder. We look back to the Norse to see how their gods of old still influence your daily life and culture. We want to explore this history with you and how it is still impacting our world today and how it is influencing our media, our attitudes, and other belief systems across the world, all influenced by these tales of morality, wit, and fantasy. So join us to see how the old gods and mythos are still impactful and what can be learned from them even now.
Alright, here we are, live on our first episode. Let me see something. Oh, there it is. I was trying to make sure we had that cool music in the background playing.
Absolutely. Love it.
So, I guess we'll just introduce ourselves, and I can start, and then we do have... Oh, Steven did join. That's cool. So then I'll start, and then we'll just go down the line to you, Drew, and then Steven, and then we'll talk about... I'll let you take us the next direction after that. Sound good? Alright, guys, I'm Frank Cephalou. Of course, you guys probably know me from one of the groups on Facebook, or your group, or whichever group I've been posting in with this link and content I've been talking about. But I run THL, and we wanted to do a video series for a season here and talk about Norse mythology. It's always captivated me, and I think it's something that I think will captivate you if you knew more about it. And I think people just don't know enough about it, and when they start hearing about it, they just want to keep hearing about it, and they want to keep learning about it. And that's where we came up with this idea. Drew and I and Steven and a couple other guys. We make a series about it. Well, that's what this is here today. I'll let the next guys introduce themselves. Drew, you want to go next?
All right. I didn't want to step on you because I can see there's a visible slight delay in the video.
Oh yeah, that's the stream delay. So you're seeing what's going out.
That's fine. So, I am Drew Warner. I am from Hookah Enthusiast Group on Facebook. You may have been more familiar with me under the name Gnome from Hookah Pro and some YouTube stuff. But I've always been an enthusiast of ancient religions, mythologies, and in general the esoteric. But all of those different mythos have a particular feel to them. They all have a reflection of the cultures they come from. And oddly enough, my background being Germanic, I still synchronize much better with Nordic mythology, with Nordic philosophies, and their core belief systems. So I thought, hey, you know what? Just as Frank said, people would probably also really be interested in it if we started a good fluid discussion over it, because it often gets overshadowed in comparison to the other Goliaths of mythology, mostly Greek and Roman. So that's where I come from. I'm also extremely familiar and adore the runes, which will be definitely delved into a little bit here, but more later on when we go into a stronger analysis of the belief systems they held.
Yeah, I know some people that just use the runes, and Drew will go into them more because he knows about them more than I do. Some people pull a rune out at the end of the day just to see what their fortune was for the day based on what rune they got. Like, it's interesting to see how those come to play.
And that is a slightly more modern take on the way of reading them that came along during the Victorian spiritual revolution, but still it is valid, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, all right. On down the line, I suppose.
Yeah, Steven, do you want to go next? Just introduce yourself.
Sure, I can do that. Can you hear me?
Yes, we could.
All right, cool. So I'm Stephen Ordway. I'm relatively novice at knowing a lot about Norse mythology. I've been reading a bunch because I'm really excited about this group. But trying to teach myself, I've been trying to find a few people to hear some stories because I feel like that's a better way to learn this. It was the original way to hear about the Norse mythos and everything else. But I'm a scientist. And so this is like kind of like a really cool deviant from what I'm normally learning and normally working on every day. So I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. Me too.
Definitely a lot more of the unscientific, the way things feel aspect.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited about that because, I mean, you know, everyone talks about science being, you know, learning as you go and getting new tools to learn more. But it's really interesting to hear kind of how people explain things that happened and how they felt and what they were feeling, and maybe like come up with reasons why something was happening back in the day. And I feel like, you know, some of what they talked about and how they did different processes actually kind of became more of like a scientific process, and how they farmed and how they ran their lives. And it was just like almost like their science back in the day. So I think it's really cool. And I think it's really interesting to like take a step back and learn about all of that.
Agreed. It's probably what there's a lot of things about Norse mythology that just made me start looking at the world very differently, and just realize that everything that I interact with, I would say, on a daily basis has some sort of link to Norse mythology. But you guys are going to see that as this series goes on. So what do you want to go with first, Drew?
Well, I thought that, as first introductions, we should probably take a look at the most basic sort of information, such as the fact that, the term Vikings is kind of a floaty term.
Hmm.
It doesn't really nail down a certain culture or time period. It was the Norse, but the Vikings were the seafaring
Right.
portion of it. Yet, for some reason, we consider the entirety of them during that time period to be Vikings. It, I mean, that's kind of an oddity, but that terminology came around somewhere in the like uh, 780s.
Well, and it was originally a verb, right?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
I Viking was originally a verb for the people who went out, and it was kind of like the Norse pirate almost. Is that right?
A wayfinder or pirate or path maker
Right.
kind of interpretation. Yeah.
It wasn't so much a people; it was more of a descriptor
Right.
of a
And maybe even considered a subculture of the Norse.
right. So that's a good like beginning right there, just to dispel people's. A lot of people have a modern thought that the Vikings were a group of people that just
Right.
went around, but in fact they were not a group of people. They actually had a civilization they were belonging to. They were just a subset of those people that did certain activity that earned them the name of Vikings, but really they were all Norse.
Exactly. And yeah, they had a handful of, to use a 21st century term, bases, but they had a handful of homestead areas, the most significant, of course, being in Sweden and Norway. But I mean, we find evidence today that, well, you know what? They had some pretty significant bases in Canada.
Yeah, they went everywhere. They went everywhere. They explored, and I believe it does have to do with their mythos and their beliefs, why they explored and
Yeah.
how they did. Um, you know, it's very interesting. It's very interesting. I'm trying to be guarded with what I say because I don't want to cross over lines that you wanted to follow.
No, no, no. On. If there's something
So
that you're going over that I wanted to go over, I'll just add to it.
Okay. Yeah.
so I guess. Oh, sorry, Frank.
No, Ashley was just asking us. So is Viking like a job title instead?
I think it's more of a subculture that did that job.
So I
sort
guess expanding on that, like from what I was reading, it's almost kind of hard to define like what exactly was the area of the Norse people. I feel like that may be a good place to start. Because we know that they traveled a lot and they took over lots of ports, for instance, because it was accessible and what they were good at. But like they expanded everywhere, and the more you read, the more it's kind of like, well where were the boundaries of the Norse people?
Wherever they decided to settle. Yeah.
I would say the epicenter is probably around Scandinavia, and that
Yeah.
area there is probably the epicenter of it, of where they started off and they spread out from. But you could find traces of them being on North America way before Columbus.
Oh yeah. Leif Erikson.
Yeah, they've been everywhere. So I think they were probably just as explorative as the Japanese were. Like you find Japanese artifacts in South America, in like Brazil, from a time that they should have been there, but somehow they got there. So the same thing with the Norse and the Vikings.
And interestingly enough, not even those places accessible or logically accessible by water. They ended up in Slavic countries and in Russia and places where you just have to ponder, how did they make that journey?
Yeah. It's bizarre. It's bizarre, and I can only think that they thought their exploration and their discoveries and whatever fights they got into, Odin was always going to be looking over to them, and then yeah, I think there was like a subculture that thought like if they went out and they fought valiantly, for doing something good, that they would be welcomed into the halls of Valhalla.
Hmm.
Um, to fight alongside Odin. I think there's a real mindset around that, for them going out. Or maybe it is an exploitative nature. I'm not sure what actually drove them. That's one of the things I thought was the reasons they got driven to what they were doing. That's what you guys think.
I think it's also, I don't know if it was the origin or if this concept got placed upon the belief system from that attitude. But of course, Odin and Wotan and all of his other titles, when he came to Earth, he was represented as the Wanderer. He went everywhere. I mean, I don't know if they would have used the term explorer because he was intended to have already known everything and everywhere.
Yeah, I keep forgetting that people might not know what we're talking about. Somebody asks, "What is Valhalla?"
Ah, it is one of the 9 worlds. It is the most coveted afterlife, for sure.
So I would say maybe we should start there because people might get lost. Is maybe explain the 9 worlds and maybe how in Norse mythology the world came to be. Because a lot of people, when you speak about dying in the Catholicism, you have 2 places you could go. You go heaven or 3 purgatory. Okay, yeah, okay. Heaven, hell, or purgatory. Um, in Norse mythology, you have several places you could go.
And they're
Valhalla,
all physically tangible, too, so that's
yes.
different.
Like Valhalla is the hall that you would dine with Odin in the afterlife, and when he goes into battle, you would fight alongside with him. And every morning, your days are spent fighting and having battles with one another. And at night, you're eating boar and you're drinking mead. And then the next day, it starts over. And the next day after that, it starts over. And that's Valhalla.
And it's done for fun.
It's done for fun. Yeah, you're fighting
because
for
you
fun.
can't die.
Yep.
Permanently there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's just one of the halls you could go to, if you die. You don't have to visit yet. True.
Let's go.
But it's interesting, like when you start getting into these stories about Norse mythology, there's so many rabbit holes you could get into, and it takes so long to try to fully explain what each of those rabbit holes mean. Like, I do want to talk about who's in charge of the underworld.
Hell or Hella.
Yeah.
I mean, there's both interpretations of her name, so.
I call her Hell. H-E-L.
I think with the A tacked on is more of a Swedish variety.
I can see that. I can see that. Yeah.
So she was one of Loki's constructs or children. I mean, the way you read it, it could be a little different, one or the other. Stephen, you want to chime in on Hela?
Sure, a little bit. So he is in charge of Helheim, correct? And essentially, she is basically in charge of where the people who don't go to Valhalla go.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And there was actually like an interesting story of Balder, who they were actually trying to get out of Hell or Helheim, sorry. And basically Hel, in doing her job of making sure that people don't leave once they're there, said if everyone on Earth and in all of the various realms weeps for Balder and being gone, then he would be able to return. And only because Loki impersonated a troll and would not cry for him was he not able to go.
Right.
I remember this story. And Balder is one of he's one of the sons.
Yeah, he's one of Odin's sons that died from a spear of mistletoe because his mother, I believe, actually made a deal with literally everything else in the universe saying, you won't harm my child. And so he was basically invincible until Loki essentially had a spear made with a tip of mistletoe because she thought that would be too weak and it wouldn't be able to kill him. And that's what ended up doing it.
Right. And there we go. There's another inconsistency among cultures is if it was a spear, if it was an arrow, or if it was a vague thing referred to as elf shot. So, yeah.
So pretty much the only agreement is that it was a projectile of some sort.
Seems like it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so when you refer to the word hell in Catholicism, it's really basically lends itself to Hela of Helheim from...
In namesake, yeah. Yet its descriptions are Greek Tartarus, so, you know.
It's interesting, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think I'm going to offend anyone by saying Catholicism is a quilt stitched together by propaganda.
I mean, that might offend some people,
Yeah,
but
I
who
can
cares?
see how that may offend some people.
I mean, there's a lot to be said for Catholicism being, you know, modified to attract Norse people, because they tried to make a lot of parallels of different things that were, I guess, sacred to the Norse people to say, hey, we have a lot of similarities. Maybe we're not different. You should join us.
Mm-hmm. Just like, for instance, the North, when they were being converted, they referred to the Catholic Christ as the White Christ and Thor as Red Thor to set them apart.
Interesting.
And they saw so many similarities, they wanted to make that deviation. Red Thor, obviously, red hair. But White Christ, to them, the word white was a derogatory term meaning frail, weak, and feminine.
Which was a very big deal to be feminine in their culture. I mean, they even had specific words like, if I remember correctly, satyr was the people of magic. And generally, men were not allowed to do that because it was considered a feminine act, that you should be able to fight battles without having magic and be able to survive and do whatever you need to do. And women were generally the ones that were the magicians, so to speak. Because it was already considered that they would be feminine, so it was perfectly acceptable to have that particular feminine trait.
And strangely enough, even with that perspective, you had women who went out and were berserkers, and you had men who stayed home and tended to the house and children. So even if they had a strong divide, they still didn't necessarily outlaw, persecute, or find a problem with drawing the line as well. So you can see how the white Christ they referred to was he did miracles. He didn't, you know, he did that magic stuff. So that's why we called him that, and Thor the Red Thor.
Right. It wasn't necessarily that feminine was.
You're cutting out a little there.
We do have a question from Ashley. She wanted to
Yes.
know what decides if you go to Valhalla or Hell.
Uh,
Well, before it's even decided if you can go to Valhalla, didn't Freya actually choose to, like, essentially, if you fought in battle and you fought valiantly, and I could be wrong on this, but Freya actually kind of got first pick of who was going to go join her in the afterlife before they could go to Valhalla. Is that correct?
yes. However, that is a narrative that came in later. So
Okay.
it's not constant, but yes, is there. Besides that, of course, it's the life you lead, it's the acts you've done, it's the bravery, in our terminology mostly, your valor that would send you to Valhalla or become a candidate for it.
And the Valkyries were the ones that led you to Valhalla, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they came and get you.
Yeah, they were your, I guess, in our 21st century, they were your reapers.
So
Death Angels, sure.
Yeah.
So, I think I want to go a little further back now and start making our way forward because I think it was like with how did how did how did the man and woman come to be in Norse mythology? Like how did their
How it
beginning start?
formed. All right.
'Cause I think a bear would be a good starting point, and we work our way forward again. 'Cause,
Okay,
like,
so we may talk about the creation of the universe and its insane story later, but we'll go forward for human creation first, huh?
we could do. It's up to you. We could do the beginning where the world gets created and how everything came to be. It's up to you.
Let's I'll talk some about the creation story. You go ahead and talk about the ash and elm, and I will drink my mead.
Okay.
Uh,
Are you passing that off to me or Frank?
Either. Sorry. Whoever feels most inclined.
Frank, I believe in you.
Do you believe in me?
I'm sorry. Did I put you on the spot?
No, I thought you were talking about the cosmos being created first, and now I was gonna talk. Now I was gonna talk about the ash and elm.
Let's go for the more personal, you know, human connection. I think that would be better for our viewers instead of talking about this insane mythos of creation.
Okay. So, I would say in the beginning, I'm trying to figure out where's the best way to start. I'm trying to think if we should start with Ymir. Hmm. Uh, what do you think? Should I start with Ymir or should I start with?
Start with the emptiness of Gunnagap, which I'm not saying properly. I'll just go in for it, I guess. So in the primordial beginning, just like in most religions, you've got the black expanse of absolutely nothing. And kind of naturally or sympathetically, there are two different lands, two different regions created of, and I'm going to say all these words wrong because I'm born English.
No worries.
Munispel or Muspelheim, yeah, which would be the fiery element. That would be the one side. It's everything that has to do with heat and fire and smoke. And on the opposite side, because these places are polar, appearing in the void, it's absolutely nothing. You've got Niflheim, the frozen wasteland of water, ice, steam, and fog. So they're both kind of steamy, and you can imagine them almost as Hubble telescope nebulas just opposing one another out in empty space.
Right.
Now, between the two, when they finally started to grow enough independently on their own, the elements mixed,
Right.
and the fire and the ice created salty brine and strange materials, and out of all this chaos, the first living entity was created. Ymir,
Yep.
the hermaphroditic giant. Ymir literally means the one who yells or screams, and it also brought sound into the world or universe for the first time doing so. So, kind of directly opposed to the peaceful sound, you've got this hermaphroditic ice and fire blending together and creating a giant. And now this wasn't just a giant like you think, oh, it's taller than the trees. No, this was a giant as in it's as big as planets. Kind of giant. So he decided, or ended up doing something very weird. Because he was hermaphroditic and in this weird element, he just spontaneously started birthing out more giants. And I believe it said that they were coming out from his armpits.
I forget
I'm correct?
completely
Yeah.
where they came out of.
Yeah, I believe they sprung out of the sweat and moisture from his armpits.
It would explain where the Greeks got their stories of Zeus procuring children from his forehead.
Yeah, I suppose. So all of their activity and the sounds they were making created disturbances in Niflheim, where the ice was cracking and gave birth to a cow.
Yeah.
A cow. What was the cow's name? Can't remember the cow's name.
I forget, but the cow was used to basically provide the necessary ingredients to create the world as we know it. And then
Well, yeah. So the cow, of course, being a cow, starts to lick the ice and uncovers the first of the Norse gods. His name was Buri, or Buri. Again, I'm going to butcher all these names. So Buri was the first of the Aesir, first of the true gods, and he gave birth to Bor. I'm going to have to look this up because it's hurting my brain. Trying to remember. Anyway, Bor had 3 sons, including Odin, and that's where our Allfather came from. He was the Allfather because he acts as the position of father for the Norse deities later on, not because he was the first.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of trippy, because when anybody comes to this language and hears Allfather, they probably think, oh, the progenitor of all the gods, right?
Yeah. And I believe his brother's name were Halnir and Loder, right? For Odin.
Sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then can I continue here with the Ask and Embla story then?
Say that again?
Do you want me to go with Ask and Embla?
Nah, we're okay. We can keep going.
Okay.
So, Odin and his brothers killed Ymir the giant. Now, here's where the world came from. It's fantastically gross. All the waters of the world were his blood. All of the soil was his flesh. The grass was his hair. And the clouds were actually puffy particles of brain that floated away.
Right.
So it's definitely a story about order from chaos. You've got the chaos of fire and ice coming together in nothingness. You've got the chaos of the death of this enormous, enormous entity. And just as it was a natural progression for Municipal and Nephilim to grow together, it was a natural progression for all this waste of the giant's corpse to form into this world. Yeah, that's pretty much it for the creation of the universe from their perspective.
Yeah. And then we could get into like the creation of man and woman, where I can take it from there if you want. And
Yeah.
basically, there were three brothers that Drew was just talking about that were created, and it was Odin, Honir, and Loder. These are the three brothers, and they were walking along the world, along the coast of the oceans that were just created, and they were trying to figure out what to do with this new landmass that was the world. And they decided what the world lacked were other beings, which came to be humans. So, on a beach, they found two tree trunks. They were just driftwood. They just lay there on the beach. They drifted to the shore. And they were shaped like a man and a woman already. So, but they had no life, and they were powerless. They were just laying there. So the gods decided they would blow life into them. So Odin picked up each log and he blew into them. And what he blew into them was life. And his brothers blew it when they blew into them. They blew into them consciousness and health, the ability to see, hear, speak, and then they dressed them. And the man's name was Ask, and the woman's name was Embla. And if you were to go to modern times, it's where the word ash and elm come from. So if you ever hear the word ash and elmwood, ashwood, they come from the trees of Norse mythology of the first man and woman that Odin blew life into. And that one story blows my mind, because you have two words that are so dominant in our language when it comes to wood that have ties back to I'm not going to say one of the oldest religions on the planet, and it's such prevalence today. And if you were to talk to people about this and bring up ash or elm, and a lot of people don't even realize those words are rooted into a religion that old, and they still have prevalence today. That story was very interesting, and basically, there's this big tree that Drew was talking about, where all the worlds exist. They coincide. And the world that they were given to live upon was called Midgard.
In the center.
In the center. And those two, man and woman, became the father and mother of the entire human race. There's other stories about these two. And there's poems about them. And, but at the end of the day, that's the core of the story of how we came to be, and it's why in Norse mythology, they choose their wood accordingly to what they're building. So, ash and elm have different properties of what they use them for. I believe, ash is used for building? Is it? Right? Because it's rooted to the ground?
Also, Yggdrasil, the world tree itself, is an ash tree.
Right.
So anything that has to be stable.
Right. Is ash.
Yeah.
And elm is flexible.
Hmm.
So it would be used for weapons and bows and stuff like that.
And there you go again with what Steve was talking about, the feminine and masculine concepts of feminine, flexible, can do more, but is not the how do I say this without offending millennials? Mm. It's let's just say that the male concept is used for the that other kind of stability.
Right. But in the stories, they're not. One's not seen as better or makes them more elevated than the other. In fact, I think, I'm not here to throw down other mythos, but compared to Greek mythology, which is filled with, I'm not going to say it, I feel like women and men in Norse mythology have pretty even roles as far as expectations of each other. Like, they don't subjugate women in the stories, which I like.
Clearly differently defined traits, aspects, and talents, but yeah, definitely not.
Both are seen as equally important.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, like they kind of viewed the concept of like you had your two different roles, but both were important in order to progress in life. You just didn't have like feminine traits were expected for one thing and masculine traits were expected for another. And like we said a little bit earlier, like there was nothing wrong with men being having those feminine traits or men men having those feminine traits or women having the masculine traits. But those were traits that were viewed separately. And a lot of that comes down to, like you guys were talking about, like where it came from. You have two different types of stability, two different types of structure. Both are important, but both have different roles.
Absolutely. And that connectivity of scene with Yggdrasil, possible word to say for me, the world tree, being ash makes making runes out of ash more more not tangible but more desirable, because it's more of that connectivity to the rest of the worlds in concept, at least.
Right. I would agree with that. Ashley asked if she thought the tree trunks were made by dwarves.
Just the trunks?
Yeah, I don't think so. The dwarves in the stories, the dwarves only came into the stories when it came to forging weapons, gifts, or like they were always like the master craftsmen in the story. Whenever you hear them, they were never involved in the story any other way that I can remember. So when you hear about the dwarves, usually the gods visited them when they needed something made. That's what they were there for.
And in that creation story, it's pretty much clearly shown that the finding of the wood is random.
Yeah, it's
not
just on the
not
shore.
They were like, hey, here's some vaguely human shapes. Let's have the dwarves carve them further. But I can see where that may have come into some verbal traditions later.
And I think that one of the things that's kind of important as we're talking about all this is like most of this wasn't written down. Most of this was by word, and because the Norse people were so spread out and they were in, more of small colonies across all these different lands, some of these stories, you have variations. So saying for sure, like, oh, this came from that is very difficult. Everyone kind of has their own almost interpretation, and until those poems and I believe they called them sagas started to get written down, it wasn't ever really like a firm set in stone kind of concept.
It was a lot about the feeling. It's like, here's a general narrative, here's the feeling and the concept that's going to come from it. And as you said, it's so spread out among actual physical dimensions. They were in such wildly different places in the world that, yeah, the developments were, as you said, extremely individual to the cultures.
Yeah. And just so you guys are here right now, we've touched upon so many random topics. But you know, this first episode is really just allows us to get our feet wet, allows you just to get an idea of what the rest of the season is going to be about. And I know Drew had some other stuff he wanted to touch into. I forget what it was, though.
Well, I think we've covered the first two topics I had my concepts on, but the last one, which you did slightly touch on, was the fact that we're so influenced by them still today in extremely profound ways. I mean, recently in the news, I don't particularly remember where it was, but it says 10-year-old boy finds runic inscriptions on mammoth bone.
Wow.
And I believe it was somewhere near Turkey.
Really?
And the thing is, the particular inscriptions were the Turkish, and the inscriptions were the Turkish and Armenian style of runes. Now, here's a little bit of point of contention among historians. Did the runes spread to the Armenians from the Norse, or the other way around? Because Armenian mythologies are actually significantly older in some areas.
That's interesting. And I think you're right. This is a good subject to segue into, is how does what in today's life is still influenced by Norse mythology. And we just do a roundtable of it. You could go first, Drew, and then Steven, I could go last.
All right, well, then I'm going to bring up the most classic and possibly overused anecdote, but because this is the first episode, I think it's fine, is the simple days of the week that we use. People would say, well, Monday is moon. Well, that's true. Tuesday, Tyr's Day, one of Odin's sons, Tyr, Tyr. Wednesdays, Wotan's Day in its original Germanic language, and Wotan was the Germanic form of Odin. Thursday, again, it's a little obvious, was Thor's Day. And Friday was Freyr's Day. And Saturday originally was Catter Day for the cats that drove Freya's sleigh. And that is a joke. Catter Day is a joke. It's, yeah, sorry. But yes, no, Freya did have cats pulling her chariot, which is absolutely amazing. But, so most of the days of the week are the Norse deity, just translated through the Tuscan region, I suppose, before they hit our calendar.
Yeah, I would say the only day that we don't owe to the Vikings and the Norse people is Saturday, which comes from Saturn, which is from Romans.
Right. Well, I mean, you got your weekend, which is planetary. You know, Saturday, Sun's Day, and Monday, which is not technically weekend, but yeah.
Yeah. So most of your week is influenced by Norse mythology, which is crazy, and a lot of people don't realize it. That half the week we're named after Odin's sons, and even in the Roman Catholic Bible, they refer to the gods of old, and they still they do nods to Odin because that's what his name is. He's the gods of old. He's the god of old. So whenever you hear of that terminology or the All Father, they're referring to Odin because that's what people refer to him.
Steve, any anecdotes of continuing use?
Well, yeah, I mean, I not so much on the Norse mythology side, but I think one of the things is also kind of important to understand about, why the Norse culture is so pervasive in our culture today is more about their lifestyle, that they lived in places that were very, very hard to live in. They lived in very mountainous regions and very cold regions. So they kind of were forced to go and travel. And that's part of the reason why, they took they traveled and conquered lots of places, is because they needed the resources to do so and to survive. And because of their traveling and constant being embedded in these other cultures and eventually blending with these other cultures, it became, we're very much in our culture in America based on Old English, culture styles that have then developed. And so when all of the Norse people came across and they settled in England and Ireland, and they created the town that we now call Dublin, it's the main reason that we have all of that and why it kind of progressed. And that was when they started writing these things down, and we started seeing it even more prevalent than it already was, because they were taking over places and settling there.
Mm-hmm. And just like Frank had said, there's a similarity, oddly enough, to the Japanese, where you're saying they were all over the world. Why did they do it? Because they didn't have any resources, too. So, it's the major driver in the ancient world. Gotta reap those resources and take them back home to build up your own.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to go into what I was going to talk about, which was some modern words that still are pervasive today, or sayings. And I don't want to get into one of them just because it leads into the whole story about the meat of poetry. But
yeah, pick your favorite for now.
Yeah, for now I'm just going to go with well, I could do the apple a day keeps the doctor away saying.
Mm-hmm.
Or may I just do something really simple? How about this? It's winter. Skiing. So, skiing, when you think of the word skiing, a lot of people don't realize where it's from, but it's a Norse word. And the Old Norse word is skio. And that word is from, I think it's they date it back to 100 BC or something, and basically, the ancient Norsemen, they used to ski across the snowy highlands, not only for fun, but for transportation. And there is often depictions of the goddess Skadi. She's also on skis or snowshoes. So we have a lot of references in Norse mythology back to skiing when they used to do it. And next time you go onto the powder, you could thank your Norse gods for that, because that is the first mention of it. And the word, even the word ski, is an Old Norse word that you're using from thousands of years ago. And this stuff like that, stuff that you just find that you use every day without knowledge of, and things that you interact with, like the act of skiing for fun, is something the Norse used to do, and the Norse gods partaked in. And to realize that if that culture never happened, sure, it may have been still around today if they didn't do it. It's gonna be skiing though. Who knows what it would have been called? Definitely would have been called skiing.
Speaking of things like that we still participate in, something to mention later definitely is a whole Yule log issue.
And the concept of keeping your Christmas tree around for longer than just till Christmas Day, because Christmas tree was almost an adoption of the cultural traditions of Yule to protect your home from the critters, I guess, and the wild spirits that would try and invade your home to avoid the cold in the winter.
Interesting.
Oh yeah. And everybody today romanticizes and loves the concept of Krampus, but he was one of those forest spirits way back when that came out to traumatize people long before he had a role of persecutor, I suppose.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it's just like those stories right there. It feels like I want to talk more.
Oh, we will.
Ashley says she has a Yule log every year. Keep the light all night long.
Nice.
Yeah, Ashley, it's very cool where words come from and how they evolved. Like even mistletoe.
Poor Blaudir. I can't say his name. Yeah.
But like a lot of people don't realize, like, a lot of stuff that we do, it has some sort of Norse connection, and I can't really think like can you think of something that doesn't? And that's the thing. It's sort of like, I think maybe that would be a whole thing. Like, people could ask, like, what about this or that? But
it's tough. I feel like when I do bring up an idea that clearly has no connection, that I think to myself, well, shit, I don't know enough. I have to research that now.
All right, Justin, I'll check it now. Let me see.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is like a really good first start. I think it'll be really cool when we can hopefully get a couple of experts in this information who can go a lot deeper, and we can have topics where we can dive in on some of those things. Will be really, really interesting.
When we get around to the practices of Norse forms of magic, I do have 2 people that I can bring in. We'll just see which one's available.
Sorry, I'm just checking a message. Yeah. And this first episode was more like the shotgun splattered the wall. Just because we never worked together on live before, so it's us getting to know each other, but also just to get things moving at the parts oiled, I would say. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, absolutely. I hope everything in the future runs as smoothly as this, because this didn't seem too bad at all to me.
No, it worked great.
We haven't had really many technical difficulties either. No. I am Hookah.
Yes.
Sorry.
Justin, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't see any messages from you. Okay. Well, that marks 1 hour of our first show. Anything else you guys want to add before we close up?
Drink more mead. It be good.
What are you drinking? What mead are you drinking?
Some relatively cheap stuff I found at Total Wine, because I need to actually order more. I believe it had an English name like Charlemagne's mead. I have to go look. I believe it was Charlemagne.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. I need to get a bottle of mead for the next show. What? Yeah. What are you pairing it with? Can I see that?
What, this?
Yeah.
That's just straight Nocla double apple.
Oh, you can't ever go on Nocla.
because Nocla double apple. I mean, it's.
Steven, what are you smoking?
I am currently trying my first bowl of unicorn.
I like that flavor.
I like it a lot. It's definitely different. The name is not at all telling, but Azure did a giveaway, and they sent me some because I won the giveaway, and so I'm trying it out, and it's actually really good. And I'm drinking some. I went to a place here in town called the Wine and Cheese Place, and picked up some mead. And for me, it's kind of hard because I'm not a huge fan of really sweet things, and because it's a honey wine, finding something that's not very sweet is kind of difficult. But I learned a lot about mead, and I'm sure there's a whole lot more to learn. But there's a local winery that started making it from wildflower honey, and it's very good.
Cool. Now, there's one thing that I can say I don't believe came from Norse influence. Unicorns.
Oh.
I think that's purely Middle Eastern, and then towards Anglo-Saxon afterwards.
Yeah, I don't think it came from Norse mythology. Definitely came from like India or like China, somewhere over there. I wouldn't say it's definitely a newer mythical creature compared to the Norse mythos. I think it came a lot after those stories were written.
Unless you compare it to the Japanese, and shoot me if I'm getting this wrong, but the Kryn, they have a horse with a single bladed horn.
But which would be older at that point then?
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. If any of our listeners know a string of connections to Nordic from the unicorn, please post. That would be interesting.
What is even mead? Yeah, we can go over that next time.
Okay, yeah, we'll go in more depth of the delicious
mead
drink. So
yeah, I think it would be cool to just have a whole episode on Norse drinks and drinking habits, because I know just from like talking to you guys, I learned quite a bit about, I mean, I figured ales probably just because a lot of the places that they kind of conquered or settled in and have a lot of ales, so I figured that. But there's a whole slew of different types of just that they drank, and a lot of the times they made ales and wines and things just for survival. That water wasn't able to be consumed, it wasn't safe, and so they had to create something that they could drink normally quite a lot of, and still be functional. So
sure, we could definitely do a whole episode about food and drink. That would be very interesting.
Yeah, we could do that. Maybe we do that next episode.
And if anybody in the comments has like an idea of other things that you're curious about or whatever that we could look into, let us know.
Yeah, the thing is, like, any of these topics could be a whole episode. Like, that's the problem with them. Okay, maybe we'll do that next episode. I don't know.
All right.
Mead.
Oh, what is our signing off phrase or signature?
I don't.
See you in Valhalla.
Yeah, until Valhalla.
That's a little dark, but okay.
Well, that means we're not coming back.
Oh, true.
I don't want to die.
Next time in Midgard.
There you go. Next time in Midgard.
Next time in Midgard. There we go. We'll use that. All right, guys. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. And we'll be back here, I guess, in 2 weeks. Just because we're trying to get the timing down of it. I didn't think we'll have enough to talk about, but after today's episode, maybe we have too much to talk about.
Yeah.
I think it's a different problem now.
Oh, hey, shall I pull a rune in correlation with this episode to see how it went according to...
Oh, go ahead. Our first rune Scrying.
I don't know if we call it that, but scrying refers to gazing into reflective surfaces. But that's me nitpicking. Oh, fantastic.
So would you explain to everybody what that means?
Well, in general, here's Tyr with his spear. Victory. We're going in the right direction.
Is that what that means, that one?
Yeah. In a generalization, because for me, I have to, do a whole spread before I get the clear concept. But that is definitely positive progression, victory, and we're going in the right course.
That's great. So we're going the right direction, guys. That's what that means. And we'll see you in 13 days.
Lucky 13.
Yeah, I think that's a good timing for now, and then maybe we'll do that for this season, and then next season, we'll try to maybe increase. We'll see what we get done with this season. Let's start one season at a time.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys. Thank you for joining us. What did we say? What was the goodbye?
Next time in Midgard.
Next time in Midgard. Later, guys.
Bye.